Well, here we are. We're doing what I'm calling Neural 8, the eighth lesson in introductory material that talks about something about the nervous system. Right now, I want to talk about special senses. Well, senses are our ability, our pet's ability, to sense different parameters or modalities in the environment. So here's a slide somebody made up, and I'm going to agree with it mostly, and I'm going to change it a little bit, like I always do. Okay, special senses. Again, I say these are chapters in the books. They're specialized organs which relay information to the brain. I could add that. There are four listed here that no one would debate that they are indeed special senses. Sight, vision, right? The sense of smell. You're going to find out I don't like that word. I mean, can you say you smell or I smell or, I smell bacon? Sometimes when you tell somebody they smell, you're talking about they have an odor or you have a dog smell to them, whatever. Hearing, yes. And taste. Okay, no one's going to debate those four. Now, I like to throw in another special sense, which I'll call balance. You might call it equilibrium, because it's a special sense located in the cranium, the head region, and it's very important. And it's very specialized organs. So it's kind of like agreeing with up here. Specialized organs. Balance is a specialized organ. Here's one that I don't like to include, touch. But sometimes when you read chapters, they'll have sight, smell, hearing, taste, and touch as the 5 special senses. Well, touch isn't a specialized organ per se. It's diffused throughout the body. There's pressure sensors and all kinds of things. So I don't include touch. So I'm going to move that down there. And I'm going to say, there are my 5. Here are my 5 special senses that I wish to talk about now. Before I get to each special sense, I want to introduce the term transducer. Transducers. I guess I could blot out the S for a minute, because all these special senses could be thought of as a transducer or collectively transducers. Here's the definition of a transducer. A device that converts one form of energy into another form of energy. The eyes do that. We're going to see that here in a second. So this might be an engineering kind of definition. Engineers make transducers, and it's a device that converts one form of energy into another. Well, for our pets and all mammals, all these special senses that we talk about have specialized organs, and this is exactly what they do. They take one form of energy and always convert it into nerve impulses. So the second form of energy is always given, is always set. Action potentials traveling on nerves. You can call them electrical impulses, nerve impulses, action potentials, whatever you want to call them. Always goes to the brain on a cable. The cables we call nerves. So it's very interesting. Now the device is different. It could be the eyeball, it could be olfactory epithelium, whatever. The devices differ, but it's always going to the brain on a cable, which we call a nerve. And I might have mentioned the labeled line theory of brain function, because all the brain gets are these action potentials coming up to it on different lines, different nerves. And it's only that the brain knows that line is associated with vision, then it interprets the message as vision. Very interesting. Okay, so then I found this beautiful little diagram that somebody had made. I'm not making it, but I'm going to block out my definition there for a minute. You saw it. You can always pause. You can always replay it. So transduction is the process by which one form of energy is changed into another. And you know, another here is always action potentials. So the eye is a biological transducer. Converts light, you could say photoenergy, into nerve impulses. So if you look at this diagram, I want to point out, here's the brain, not the brain, here's the eye. And the brain is back here, and this line is really the optic nerve. Each eye sends messages to the brain by the optic nerve. And the messages always flow from the eye to the brain, never back. So that's afferent message, right? Sensory nerves are always afferent. And in this case, it's hard to see, but they have light, maybe from the sun, light bulb, it doesn't matter, reflecting off something. I don't think that's a prism, but it could be. Anyway, the eye here is detecting light energy, photoenergy, and is transducing it into nerve impulses on the optic nerve. Okay, so now I want to talk about those 5 senses, special senses. Remember, I'm just peeling back one layer of the onion in this introductory material. So here we've got a dog, we've got its eye showing. You can read the parts, you can pause this. Photoenergy, follow my laser pointer. Photoenergy comes into the eye, is focused on the retina. These are terms you should remember. The retina has the photoreceptor cells. Remember the rods and the cones. The rods are more for night vision, black and white, basically. The cones in the retina do color vision. And they, dogs do have color vision. Dogs aren't the best at seeing things. Anyway, there's the parts. Okay, now I want to talk about a horse in particular, how they see. I'm going to enlarge this a little bit. Couple things you should know. Well, horses have their eyes on the side of their skulls, not facing forward like dogs, cats, and humans. So this image shows what the right eye sees, and it's quite the range. That's way more than, it's not 180 degrees, but it's way more than 90 degrees. So the placement of the eyes are important for the horse because it's got a great range on the right eye and a great range on the left eye. And then where both eyes see is right in front of them. And then the other important point is it's blind back here. The horse cannot see you or anything that's in this range here where it's called blind. So one take-home lesson, never walk up to a horse in its blind range because you're going to spook it. It's not going to be detecting that you're there. It might kick, it might run off, whatever. Approach the horse if you're coming from the back, way off to its right side or its left side. Okay, so what we have to do now is bring up some terms. If an animal only sees with one eye a certain range in vision, that's called monocular vision. One eye, ocular and mon, right? Mono means one, ocular, sight. If the horse or any other animal is seeing something with both eyes, you call that binocular vision. And it has depth perception here. When both eyes can see some object, you can sense the depth of it. Over here you can't, and over here in the left range you can't. So, but the horse is a prey species. That means It has to defend itself by running away. It's not a predator, it's a prey species in the course of history. So if a line is coming up, line, Lion, is coming up here, it's going to see it. It doesn't have to see how big it is. That would be over here, depth perception. But it's going to run away, or over here. Here, it can sense how wide something is, like if it's going to jump over a little crevice or a little stream, it can judge distance over here. Notice a blind spot. Right below the horse is a blind spot. And you can study horse sight forever, but you should know that if you're going to jump over something, the worst thing you can do is jump over something that's over here and have the horse turn sharply to the right and jump over something. It hasn't been able to judge depth. It's not going to do well. Here, you've got to let the horse see with both eyes where you're going. That's the bottom line. Okay, now we're talking about hearing. You can also call it audition, the ability to hear. Of course, we're talking about the ears. Of course, I've got some diagram that I got from somebody. There it is. Looks like a Great Dane. The cartilaginous floppy part of any ear on any of our mammals, our pets, is called the pinna, P-I-N-N-A. And of course, you know, those are like little funnels where an animal can move those and get sound, auditory waves directed into the ears. If you're a person listening to this, which most people are, I guess, unless there's space aliens listening. Anyway, you can cup around your ears and hear better, mimicking that. Well, if you look at this lower diagram, it shows you some parts of the ear. Well, ends up being, with our animals, there's like this almost vertical part of the ear canal. And I guess they have it labeled vertical canal. The pinna, I should say, is up here. And so you should know then there's a horizontal part, and this is all air conduction of sound waves. And then the eardrum, which you call tympanic membrane, or we can all call it, then leads to three bones, which we will call the auditory ossicles. And then that's going to vibrate fluid and hair cells. And remember, I'm not getting into the workings because then we could spend 200 minutes on this rather than 3 or 4. The point is, dogs have a good range of hearing. They're better than us at hearing. Probably not better at sight, which was the last thing we talked about. The other thing is, with this anatomy, it's hard to take the temperature of a dog by its tympanic membrane, the eardrum. You know, when you go to a physician's office, they stick that little device in your auditory canal because it's mostly horizontal, and the infrared thermometer senses the temperature of the tympanic membrane. That's hard to do with the dog. Come down like that. The other implication here is that if you have a very large dog and some veterinarian has prescribed eardrops for it, make sure they realize the size of your dog. They should, because the dog is right there. But sometimes they have one direction for all dogs, like put 2 drops into each ear for 10 days, daily for 10 days. Well, I've had some very large dogs that what I have been prescribed as eardrops. I tell my vet that I say 2 drops aren't going to get way into the ear on a 160-pound dog. So anyway, hearing, very good idea. And the last thing I'd like to point out is that all these messages, all these sensory organs, remember, are taking, in this case, sound waves and is transmitting it to the brain, which is over here, as action potentials. That's all the brain sees. A certain nerve is lighting up with action potentials at a certain frequency. Okay, here we are with the sense of smell. or I'd like to call it olfaction. Okay? Smell, I know what we're talking about, but sometimes if somebody says you smell, well, I'm not sure what they're talking about. Anyway, let's bring some visuals over. The first thing you should know about olfaction is that it's a chemoreceptor phenomenon, right? It's chemicals. Chemicals that are in the air are sensed by our dogs. I've got a dog picture here, and man, the stories about how well dogs can sense odors is phenomenal. Some people would say 100 times better than a person, some 1,000 times better than a person. I've seen it 10,000 times better than a person. Okay? So I'm not sure what the real number is. It's hard to really say, but I want to talk about olfactory epithelium. Those are where the sensory nerves are. And so I'm going to use my laser pointer and say the olfactory epithelium, I'm up in this upper image here, is in the nasal cavity, of course, but they're in what's called a dorsal caudal location. So watch my laser pointer. There it is. I'm kind of like right below the eye in that cutout diagram there. This is where the olfactory epithelium is. There's a lot more sensory receptors in the dog than people. And dogs, man, they've just had a spike in their employment, right, status. They don't have news where you see the percent unemployed or employed, but there's dogs all over sniffing for bombs, drugs, you name it. But I'd also like to talk about, since we have this diagram here, this region up here. Now I'm going to call that rostral ventral. Because remember, when you're in the head, it's hard to say cranial. So when you say rostral, that means nearer the end of the nose here. Rostral and then ventral. That's where another organ is located that can sense smells, but they're special smells. And that is the vulvaral nasal organ. So I'm going to put it right up here so you can see the spelling. So I'm saying the vulvaral nasal organ is an accessory olfactory system located rostral ventral that's specialized for detecting pheromones. And pheromones are odors given off into the environment from one animal and are detected by another animal of the same species. That's the pure definition. And then those pheromones have an influence on the animal that senses them. Okay? So I just wanted to talk about that for a second. Okay, let me get rid of some of this stuff and then show you another diagram that somebody has drawn. And I really like this because these are great. And it shows you here is rostral in this dog. Nostrils, the air is drawn in to the nasal cavity. They're showing the olfactory nerves, and the olfactory bulb is really part of the brain, but the olfactory epithelium is in the upper part, which is dorsal, and then caudal, dorsal caudal location. They are not showing the vulvaral nasal organ down here. The point is, to the right here, I'm over here now at this diagram, scent molecules come in the air. Actually, there's like a liquid area here, and they actually dissolve in liquid and then are sensed by these olfactory receptor cells, which are nerve cells, of course, action potentials, and they're depicting those in yellow. That's kind of neat. Once they get activated, they send action potentials on these nerve tracts, and the axons then carry the impulses to the brain. I like that diagram, pretty good. Okay, now we're ready to talk about taste. I'm up here looking at taste, and it's also another term, of course. Terms are important when you're learning the language for the first time. Gustation, the sense of taste. Well, this resides on the tongue in taste buds. So we've seen this diagram before. Here's the better, let's say, bird's eye view. And of course, there's the tongue here. And on the tongue are located taste buds. So let me do a few more things here. Here's somebody's drawing that shows the 4 classic flavors: bitter, sour versus sweet, and then salty, right? Sour, sweet, and sour. Let's see. I think if you go to some restaurants, you can order sweet and sour, what, pork? I don't know. Anyway, there's salty and there's bitter. But you should know there's probably a 5th flavor. And let me show you this diagram. It's been cut off somehow, but the point is I want to focus on the 5 different flavors. And we've got sweet, salty, bitter, sour, as we had before. But then we have this Japanese word. And I think it's pronounced umami. Umami. It basically means delicious. And it's a flavor when you can't classify it to the 4 classic tastes. You can probably say it's the delicious flavor, umami. Okay? So that might be a new word for you, umami. Then finally, for taste, I want to show you this diagram that somebody made. And I couldn't find one for dogs and cats and horses. Excuse me. But I will make a comment on this. Humans have about 9,000 taste buds. I've seen data for dogs that are less. So maybe that's where we can brag about. We have a better tasting ability than dogs, but obviously they trump us on like smelling, olfactory. But I thought it's interesting, the calf and the pig has more taste buds than we do. So that's maybe one take-home lesson there. They do sense taste here. But then birds have far, far fewer taste buds in general. This one says the chicken has 24. I've even seen data where it says less than that. But birds in general don't really have the sense of taste, which is very interesting. I know my wife feeds our pileated woodpecker that comes to visit us suet, and in the suet it has like chili powder. So the raccoons don't like it, but the pileated woodpecker could care less because it can't taste the chili powder. Always very interesting. Now finally, here we are with balance, equilibrium. Remember, I'm saying that's a special sense. Not every textbook would agree. That doesn't matter. It's a specialized organ that lets us know in our pets how we're orientated relative to space. Of course, well, maybe not of course, but you should know that the sense of balance is located in the inner ear. And so if an animal has an inner ear infection, maybe they can't walk right, maybe they can't stay upright. And it's really called the vestibular system. It's a series of ducts and canals that are fluid filled. Remember, we're doing a very superficial presentation. So it's ducts and canals that are fluid filled that have hair cells. And I guess I did not mention that before because there are hair cells for hearing as well. The hair cells, when they move in the vestibular system, it sends off action potentials on what's called the 8th cranial nerve. And it feeds into the brain. Of course, the brain is only seeing action potentials on certain nerves. And then the brain can perceive that the animal is upright, it's tilting, it's bending. It's an amazing process. But balance, equilibrium, is due to the vestibular system, which is canals and ducts that are fluid filled, that have air cells. Air cells. That's cells. And finally, here's the list of illustrations used. I guess I can perfectly make it a line, but it doesn't really matter. Thanks for listening to this lesson.